Hello, good afternoon, and a very warm welcome indeed to this afternoon's iOB business webinar. It's a pleasure to have you on here. And as always, we've got some amazing content lined up for you today. Okay, so if this is your first time joining us for an iOB business webinar, please allow me to run through a little bit about how these work just to ease you into this. Okay, so we do an introduction always with myself. My name is Ben and I'm the resident business coach here at iOB Business. Now, very shortly after this introduction, we're going to dive into a webinar presentation. Now, today's topic are textbook procrastination behaviors and how you can beat them. Okay, so when we are finished going through our presentation, we're going to dive into a Q&A. Okay, now the Q&A is valuable because it gives you a chance to ask any questions that you might have and indeed jot down anything that you might not have known or have picked up throughout the webinar. Okay, now what we would encourage you to do throughout each topic is we're going to take a brief pause. Please feel free to write down any notes or jot down any questions that you might have for me or us at iOB Business throughout today's session. Okay, so for those of you joining us again, it's a pleasure to see you as always. A very warm welcome and a big thank you for taking the time to join us. All right, so just going to get us set up on today's session. Okay, now, whilst we are getting set up, once again, we're going to be talking about textbook procrastination behaviors and how to beat them. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and switch off my camera, but you should still be able to see the screen and you should still be able to hear my voice. Okay, all right, so if you could just do me a massive favor and just drop a confirmation there that you can in fact hear my voice okay, and you can indeed see the screen as well. Okay, perfect. So it looks like we are good to go for today's session. Thank you so much for that. So textbook procrastination behaviors. Okay, well, look, all of us, whether in business, whether in personal lives, whether it's something we've been putting off for a while, all of us can be guilty of procrastination at the best of times. Okay, so this is why we decided that it'd be a wonderful topic to cover for your wonderful selves today, because we can cover so many key elements of why procrastination happens, why it's a problem, what you can do about it. Okay, so specifically, and probably the most important part there, how to beat these procrastination behaviors. Okay, so your presenter today, once again, is myself. My name is Ben Porter Smith, and I am a business coach. Okay, I specialize in working with small businesses and helping them to achieve stability and growth. It's what I get to do every day. It's what I truly love to do. Okay, so moving on to today's session, as always, we're going to run through 3 individual topics. Number 1, we're going to talk about doing anything but the project at hand. Okay, so this is going to start to sound familiar to you because we're going to discuss in various ways a textbook procrastination behavior. Okay, so the topic of today's title, textbook procrastination behaviors and how to beat them. Okay, so really what I want to do here is I want to run you through what the textbook procrastination behavior is, and they're probably going to begin to feel familiar as we go throughout today's session. Okay, second, sudden bursts of energy followed by immediate tiredness. Okay, now I know this one isn't unique. I know this one has happened to many of the people that I've worked personally with. It's happened to many of the other businesses that I know and have heard of. Okay, so sudden bursts of energy followed by immediate tiredness. If this sounds like you, keep listening because we're going to get to that. And finally, items that are easy solves. Okay, so this is what we're going to run you through here to make sure that you know exactly what you can do and how to run with this. Okay, so let's begin with topic number 1, doing anything but the project at hand. Okay, so point number 1, okay, doing anything but the project at hand. Okay, now let's have a look at this. Okay, let's just say, let's slow it down for a minute. And let's say, okay, well, you've got, let's say you need to write a 3-page report for a client, okay, which is a pretty common one in the digital marketing world, in the digital agency world. Okay, now, of course, there are ways to automate these, speed them up, make them more intelligent. Okay, but let's say that this one specifically, a client has asked you to write the report by hand. Okay, they want to know something specific. They'd like it to be a little bit more bespoke and custom. Okay, which is not unusual of clients to ask for in various ways. So what we've got to be aware of here is this kind of project is something that can be daunting, difficult, especially if it's not something that we've necessarily done before. Okay, now with this logic, we think, okay, well, maybe I do want to get started, or maybe I just want to think about it a little bit more and then I'm going to get started a little bit down the line, or maybe I'll just have a go at it right now. Okay, now doing anything but the project at hand. Okay, one of the best examples of this really is let's say you've been working from home. Let's say you've been going through, the pandemic, COVID. If you're still working at this point, you've been working from home. Okay. Now, of course, at home, you've got various other temptations. You've got the TV, you've got the lovely, comfortable looking couch. You've got chores that need to be done. Okay. So with this logic in mind, you think, okay, well, I've got a task and the task is kind of tricky. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go and clean the house. I'm going to do the dishes. I'm going to put the washing away. I'm going to go and make the beds. I'm going to just generally hoover, tidy up, because it's easy and I think it needs to be done. Okay. Because you're sitting there having an awful lot of difficulty on focusing on the project at hand. Okay. Now, most likely, the reason I use a 3-page report as an example is because they're not necessarily easy to do if you haven't got the right systems in place. And even if you do, sometimes they can be a little bit tricky. But more than anything, the likelihood of this is that it's simply a bespoke, custom written report that's got to be 3 pages long or, whatever. Okay. But this is the sort of example. So the why behind this, okay, why do you go and do things that are essentially anything but the project at hand? Why are you going off cleaning the house when you've got a report to write? Okay. So the answer here is that you are lacking control over your project. Therefore, you should subconsciously seek control elsewhere. Okay, so this is essentially what begins to happen when we feel like we don't really know everything. Now, let's just say you need to do a Facebook post, something that you've done hundreds, if not thousands of times before. You would do that without even thinking about it. You have full control over the situation because you know how to do it repeatedly. Okay, now, when we lack control over a specific item or project like we have here, what's happening is we're lacking control over it because we don't necessarily know how to do it, or we certainly don't know how to do it easily. So we feel like it's getting a little bit out of control. We don't know how much time it's going to take, how much effort it's going to take, how difficult it's going to be, how complex the report needs to be. So we begin to feel this lack of control. Now, what's something that you've done lots and lots and lots of times before? Okay. What's something that gives you an endorphin rush, a feeling of achievement, a feeling of success once you've done it? Cleaning the house. It's something that you've very likely done lots of times before. It's something that feels good when it's done, because everybody likes sitting in a nice, clean, organized space where they know where everything is. And you have your messy organized, and your organized, and your clean organized, and all types of different people. But the bottom line here is, when you have done what you need to do around the house, do you feel more in control? Do you feel mentally more comfortable? Do you feel happier? Do you feel more productive? Of course you do, because there's not an obvious project facing you and saying, oh, hi, I need to be done before you do anything else. But the second thing is, you've done this that many times before that you feel like it's something in your life that you can control. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to follow this format throughout the rest of the presentation. Okay. So we're going to cover the topic, doing anything but the project at hand. This is a textbook procrastination behavior. An example of it, cleaning the house. And then we're going to cover the why, and then we're going to cover the how to beat it. Okay. So the why, you're lacking control over your project. Therefore, you subconsciously seek control elsewhere. Okay. So how do we beat it? Well, first thing you can do is segment your project into achievable bite-sized pieces and get little chunks done at a time. Now, the reason that we're putting it this way is because with each little chunk that you get done, you feel an ounce more of control. Okay. You feel an ounce more of achievement, an ounce more of success. Okay. You understand what it is that you're doing, and you understand that you're doing it well. Okay. So let's say that you've got a big project full of 10 chunks. Let's say you get 2 of those chunks done per day. Each day you're going to feel like, tick, job done, and a job well done at that. Okay. Now, the reason that this is important is because this endorphin rush, this feeling of success and achievement, is ultimately what keeps you going. So if you segment a larger, potentially more intimidating prospect down into an actually much more manageable one, you're going to feel pretty quickly like you're beginning to become in control again. Okay. Now, with larger projects like this, you piece them apart and you think, right, well, here we have a 3-page report that we need to do. I've got 5 days to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and write half of page 1 today and half of page 2 tomorrow. Then on Wednesday, I'm going to write, and this is assuming we're starting on a Monday, then I'm going to write another half over Wednesday and Thursday. Okay. So that's 2 pages out of the 3 done. And then on the final day, on the Friday, your momentum should be so good and you've become so familiar with the task at hand that you should be able to just draft that whole page in one go on the Friday and do your proof checking. Okay. Now, second thing you can do, you can write and record anything to do with the project. You can perfect it later. This is something referred to pretty commonly in business is as fear paralysis. Okay, now paralysis essentially means you can't move. Okay, now it's not quite as extreme as this, but with fear paralysis, basically what's happening is you're putting thoughts and opinions into your own mind that may not necessarily exist. You're almost overthinking to an extent where you're so scared of making the wrong decision or doing something incorrectly that you're doing nothing at all. Now, what can really, really help in these situations is to write down or begin recording your project or whatever it is that you've got to do. You just get started. Okay, now you'll feel like when you get started, you'll have your momentum. You'll begin to understand that actually I am capable. Actually, I'm doing really, really well here. Okay, now you go through these motions and you get yourself through the project, you get yourself completed with whatever it is that you need to do. You have a massive feeling of achievement for just having it done. Now, it's so much easier to go back and perfect something or tweak it, optimize it, than it is to get it exactly right the first time around. Now, of course, with this example, it's something that you should look at very carefully, because if you want to go back and record or re-record or tweak or perfect, it's something that needs to be done at the end of the project. Okay, so with this theory, you need to make sure that you're either focusing very, very much on it as you write it, or if you're going to perfect it later, that's also fine. Just make sure that you are going back and proofreading it. Okay, but it is a very good way to get around this doing anything but the project at hand. Now, the final thing that you can do here is change your environment. Okay, fresh surroundings introduce fresh thinking. This is something that can be very, very effective for entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals, even if you're doing something in a personal sense. Now, you bring yourself into this fresh surrounding. You've no longer got the distractions that you might have at home or in the office. You've no longer got a feeling of desire to go and do something else. You've no longer got anybody or anything around you distracting you. Okay. What you've now got is a fresh surrounding. You've got fresh things to look at, fresh atmosphere to enjoy. Often with these fresh atmospheres, you can feel rejuvenation. You know, you can feel like you have more energy, more oomph, more get up and go, which can be so important when you are focusing on something, when you're trying to get something done, especially if you're doing it for the first time. Give yourself a new surrounding, give yourself a new environment, because you will feel enthused, you'll feel ready to go. Okay, sometimes you just need to get a little bit out of the house or the office and go and get a little bit of new scenery. Okay, so that brings us to the end of topic number 1. Please go ahead and let me know if you would like to ask any questions or jot down any notes there. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief moment now. I'll be more than happy to receive your questions. I'm going to give you a little chance to jot down any notes as well. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance now to jot down any notes and indeed ask any questions that you have for me on today's session. Moving on to topic number 2, sudden bursts of energy followed by immediate tiredness. Now, is this beginning to sound familiar? Okay, so topic number 2, beginning with the example as always. Firing through segment 1 of your project and feeling exhausted before segment 2. Okay, so this is a big burst of motivation. We're flying through it and we're saying, yeah, we can get this done. We're writing it down or we're recording it as quickly as we can because we're firing through it 110 miles an hour. And then when we get to segment 2, we say, oh, actually, I'm pretty exhausted. I don't think I can do it. I feel really tired now. I just need to go to bed, or I need a rest, or I can't look at this again today. Okay. Now, this is a big example, and it's such a common thing that happens, especially within project work. Okay. Now, the reason we refer back to project work is because often when you're building campaigns, that's a project. When you're building a website, that's a project. When you're writing SEO, copy, that's a project. Okay. There's a lot of projects involved in digital agency work. Now, this is why it's so important to make sure that you've mastered the art of managing projects, because if you can do this, you can try and ensure that you don't have too much procrastination going on. The why is why does this happen? Why does firing through segment 1 of your project and feeling exhausted before segment 2 happen? Is because your brain is telling you to work hard and you're experiencing bursts of motivation. Your brain's saying, hey, you need to wake up and get something done today. You need to be productive today. You need to be successful today. When your brain does this, it tells you that something has to happen. So you decide to go and make something happen. But instead of this being a work ethic or a sort of a slow burner, what ends up happening instead is that you fly into this at 110 miles an hour. You fly into this at full speed and you end up going through it. Sure, maybe you do it well, maybe you don't. But the point is you get something done because you're relying on this temporary motivation. Okay, your brain has woken you up today, told you to work as hard as you possibly can. Okay, this is a burst of temporary motivation. How can you beat it? You don't need motivation. You need work ethic. They're two different things. Motivation is something that will carry you forwards, usually for a temporary amount of time. Motivation is something that we can get from our surroundings. Maybe we've watched a video, maybe we've heard an audio tape, maybe we've spoken to someone, maybe we've read something that has made us feel motivated. The difference between motivation and work ethic is that motivation is usually temporary because it's a feeling that we have gotten from something else. Whereas work ethic is something that is instilled long term. If you have ever worked a job in your younger days, your current days, you are very, very good at sticking to a study schedule, you're in higher education, whatever it is that you may be doing, you'll find that a level of consistency has to be achieved here. Now, personally, I've worked in jobs in my late teens that taught me the value of a good, strong work ethic. We don't have any other option than to turn up, get the job done, and do it well. Now, with this theory, you begin to implement strong work ethics throughout yourself, your culture. It becomes ingrained in you. Now, when you have this, you'll be able to commit the same work ethic to anything that you take on. You'll be able to understand that a work ethic doesn't mean that we have temporary bursts of motivation and we fly through a task. What it actually means is that we make sure we're working through at a good pace. We're getting enough done as much as we need to do, even a little bit more. But we're not going so fast that we're going to begin to feel exhausted, tired, deflated, unhappy. Okay? This is not what we want. Second thing, establish a steady working pace with regular breaks. This is how you can stop flying through something and feeling like you can't do any more. It's better to move through. And of course, there's a good story here, the rabbit or the hare and the tortoise. Okay, it's a fantastic story. Now, if you're not familiar with it, essentially, it's a childhood story where it really goes to show that slow and steady wins the race. The turtle or the tortoise in this example goes slowly, but makes it all the way to the end. The hare comes flying out of the gate very, very quickly, hurts themselves because they were going so fast, can't make it to the end of the race. The tortoise took a steady pace and made it to the end. So you need to establish a steady working pace with regular breaks. Now, whilst this is a fun childhood story, there are some very, very real lessons that you can learn from this in your business professional life. Establish a steady working pace with regular breaks. Okay. Third point, avoid distractions. Put your phone in a different room if you must. This is something that I advise regularly and very, very often with my personal clients. It is such a strong, useful tactic. The reason behind this is that one less distraction is one more task done, okay? Now, of course, it's not always as simple and straightforward as this, but essentially, if you begin to learn, you teach yourself to put your phone, any other distractions outside of the room. You're not picking it up and checking Facebook. You're not picking it up and checking TikTok or Instagram or Twitter or any other social media. If you get a text, you don't know about it. As long as anything important is coming in, or if you're expecting an important call, of course, this is different. And the phone is just an example here. This could be anything, any number of things, okay? You need to make sure that any distractions are out with the room. They're somewhere else, somewhere that cannot be accessed, cannot distract you. These are the key things that you need to look at here. Okay, you don't need motivation, you need work ethic. Establish a steady working pace with regular breaks. Going steady, you're not going to burn out, you're not going to go too fast. Taking regular breaks, you're giving yourself a chance to rest. Chances are, if you work at a steady pace and you give yourself opportunity to rest, eat, relax, you can do segment 1 and segment 2 in the same day. Avoid distractions, put your phone in a different room if you must. You're not picking up texts, you're not picking up notifications, you're not deliberately distracting yourself with social media. Okay, so that now brings us to the end of topic number 2. And please do take a moment to jot down any notes and indeed ask any questions that you might have for us on topic number 2 there. And I'll see you again very briefly for topic number 3 today. Okay, fantastic. So moving on to topic number 3 now. Thank you so much for the question. I'll get that for you very, very shortly in about 10 minutes time there when we go into the Q&A at the end of topic number 3. Okay, so jumping from idea to idea. Okay, now here is a great example for you here. Okay, partway through working a project, you change screens to write down a note about something unrelated. Okay, now this is something that you can be very much aware of, very much able to spot. Okay, so jumping from idea to idea, partway through working a project, you can change screens to write down a note about something unrelated. Now, this is something that we need to be aware that we're doing because it's so easy to become distracted and we think, well, actually, that's a great idea. Give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to flick this screen off and flick another screen up and I'm going to write that down. Interesting fact for you here. Every time, on average, you stop working on a task and you go back to that task, it takes you about 15 minutes to get back to full focus, full speed, if you like. Okay. Why is this important? Because if you do this regularly, you're taking 15-minute chunks out of your day. Now, if you imagine you spend 8 hours of a working day, and let's say that you get distracted 10 times a day, how does that maths work out? We have 10 times 15 minutes. That's 150 minutes. Now, if my maths is correct, 150 minutes would be 2 hours and 30 minutes. Okay, that's a lot of time that you're spending out of an 8-hour day just not focusing, not on a lunch break, not on a regular break, just not focusing, meaning that your productivity is being hampered. So partway through working a project, you change screens to write down a note about something unrelated. This is an example. Why? Your brain is full of ideas and you find the new idea more interesting than the task at hand. This is true, whether unfortunate or not. It is not something that you should be ashamed of. It's not something that is really that you need to fix either. It's fantastic that your brain is full of ideas and it's fantastic that you love these new ideas, but they cannot be more interesting than what you're doing right now. Because at one point in time, there's a very, very strong likelihood that the task at hand now was one of these previously more exciting ideas. Okay. Now, what you need to make sure that you do, how to beat it, practice focusing on a singular concept or idea until it's complete. This is something that's not always easy to learn. Now, we're going to cover various ways in which you can do this, like we always do. We're going to give you 3 ways now of how you can beat this. What you need to focus on is making sure that you're not flicking your screens off. You're not pulling yourself away from something. 15 minutes to regain focus, that's a lot, especially when you're doing it more than once throughout the day. When you do this, you lose 15 minutes. So the first thing that you can do to resolve this is practice focusing on a singular concept or idea until it's complete. Second thing that you can do, if you must write down your ideas, wait until your next scheduled break. How does that sound? Not saying that you can't flick off the screen, not saying that you can't change and think about whatever it is you want to do. But generally, with us entrepreneurs, with us professionals, we're bursting with ideas. There's so much that we want to say. There's so much that we want to do. There's so much that we want to think about. So what we do, usually when we're working on a task at hand, we'll flick off of that and we'll just take a quick note. Oh, it's not going to hurt. It's harmless. You take down that quick note and it's done. The 2 things that you're doing here. First thing you're doing, you're distracting yourself from your main task, okay, which of course isn't good because it's going to take you time to refocus. The second thing that you're doing is you're not giving this new note or this new theory enough of your focus and attention because you're trying to balance 2 things at once. So whilst you're writing down these notes on your right hand, you're trying to maintain focus on your left hand whilst looking at the screen, doing whatever you were doing. Neither of them are getting your full attention. Therefore, neither of them are going to be the caliber or quality that you're capable of. Okay. Now, there is no specific level for that. It's just what is your maximum potential? What is your maximum caliber? By distracting yourself, you're never going to achieve that. Okay. So wait until your next scheduled break. You'll find this very, very useful and very, very productive. The final thing from this webinar that you can pick up to do would be reassess your priorities. If your new idea is more exciting, is this telling you something? Okay. Now, this is something that we do work on. this is something that we as professionals and individuals and entrepreneurs need to always be conscious of. Is this something that's being brought to me because it's more exciting, or is it just because it's new? Is this something that I'm thinking of because really this is a passion of mine and what I'm doing right now isn't? Not encouraging you to overanalyze. Please don't overthink. If, however, you do find yourself regularly thinking about something other than what you're currently doing because that seems more exciting, you then need to analyze for yourself, is that because it's simply new and exciting and shiny? Or would that possibly be because actually a lot of your passions exist over there and not so much about what you're doing here, or even skill set? Okay, that now brings us to the end of topic number 3. So fantastic having you on here. A real pleasure as always presenting to you. What we're going to do now is give you another brief moment to jot down any notes and indeed ask any questions that you might have for us there on topic number 3, or indeed about the webinar, business, digital agency management. And then we're going to go on to a recap of today's session, and we are going to dive onto the Q&A. Okay. So, summary of today's session. Number 1, take control of your project. This is something that's so important for you to learn how to do, because once you do this, you begin to understand, actually, I don't need to go and do something else because I can take control of what I'm doing right now, and that feels great. Number 2, work ethic beats motivation every single time. Motivation is temporary, work ethic is permanent. And finally, see tasks through to completion. Become good, become practiced at waiting until your next break to write down whatever it is that you need to do. Therefore, allowing yourself the chance to stay focused, keep on at the task in hand, and see it through to the end. It feels great. Okay, so I hope that that makes sense. If not, you're absolutely more than welcome to ask any questions. So, as always, a massive thank you for attending on today's webinar. It's been a real pleasure having you on here. If you would like to talk to a member of our team, you're more than welcome to head over to iob-business.com/talk-to-us. You can then book a call at a time that suits you. We would love to speak to you. You'll see a calendar just like this one, so you can go ahead and pick a time and date that works for you. And I'm going to go ahead and leave this up on the screen there so that you can access it whilst I'm running through today's questions. All right, so the first question I have from you today: why is working quickly a bad thing? Okay, now here's the thing, right? Working with speed is absolutely fine as long as the pace is sustainable and you're working with accuracy, okay? Often people work faster than what's comfortable, and inevitably this is why they crash. If you're flying at 100 miles an hour, inaccuracy, of course, there's a higher risk of this because you're trying to work through as quickly as you can. But the second thing that you might find is that you might burn out. So whether you're a slow worker, medium paced, average paced, fast paced, whatever you might define this as, there is no rule, okay, as long as you're hitting deadlines. But really what you need to be aware of is that actually if I'm going too fast for myself, then I run a risk of crashing, okay? So working quickly is not a bad thing, but if it's too quick for you personally, then it is a bad thing. So I hope that that makes sense. Thank you so much for asking. Second question, I'm bursting with ideas. Fantastic. Okay, so question, I'm bursting with ideas. I don't want to miss any by not writing them down. I get this. I'm exactly the same, okay? But like many entrepreneurs, you've got a motivated and intelligent brain. Okay, you should also be aware that many of your ideas will be similar to previous ideas or non-starters. Okay, so it's part and parcel of being a business owner. Take a moment until your next break. If you can remember it, it's a good idea. This is the way that I look at it personally. This is the way that I would advise you look at this as well. What you find is, if you're somebody who loves to write things down, if you're somebody who's always bursting with ideas, there's a very, very strong chance, and I can't say for definite, but there's a very, very strong chance that you've written down that or something similar before and then moved on from it because it's a non-starter or you've forgotten to go back to it. So the way I like to look at this, say your next break isn't for an hour, and you go back to the task at hand. If the idea that you had was truly good, truly valuable, you'll still have it in your mental space until you can have a chance to write it down there, okay? Now to me, that's what says, was this just a passing thought or was it actually a genuinely good idea? All right, so I hope that that answers your question. Another fantastic one. Thank you so much. Just going to go ahead and check now if I do have any more questions on today's session. Okay, no, looks like that is us. All right, so as always, I hope that you have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon, the rest of your evening. A massive thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's been a real pleasure presenting to you, and I very much look forward to seeing you again on the next iOB Business webinar. Take care and bye for now.